What is up, guys? Pie Muffin here, and here we are at the end of it all. Probably, unless they release more DLC, but yesterday, I believe it's yesterday when I'm actually recording this, I finished my Tales of... well, let me not say it like that. My Tales of Arise playthrough finished uploading on YouTube. I've actually been done playing the game for about a month, but I didn't want to, like, overload. Like, I wasn't going to do, like, 3 or 4 uploads, you know, every single day. I wanted to, you know, have it be a series people can watch over time. And it's actually kind of weird that we're actually finally at this point. I guess the actual end of the playthrough has been over since, like, last week. Because obviously I did have the cameo post-game stuff that we just did, and then we had the Sword Art DLC that we did. But yeah, so like I said, unless there's more that comes out like the Sword Art DLC, I think we're pretty much done with the Arise videos in actual Tales of Arise. I've recorded this review several times, but I gave it some waiting time after I recorded the first few times because I think the initial hype of a new Tales game was kind of skewing my actual feelings on things. Like, I was so, like, excited and happy that we had finally had a new Tales game, and I was, you know, emotional on how it all ended, that I was just kind of like, after the fact, I was like, you know what, some of these things, I don't know if I'm truly feeling after now that it's been some time. So I gave it some time. I decided I would wait till my playthrough is done uploading, and then I would record, hopefully, a shorter review, because my first few reviews were all like 30-40 minutes long. I don't want to, you know, I'm not trying to recap the entire game. I just want to talk about what I liked, what I didn't like, what I'd like to see change in the future, stuff I'd like to see them keep for the future, you know, stuff like that. So let's just dive right in. So first of all, I do want to say I did enjoy Tales of Arise. It was a very enjoyable experience. I enjoyed, you know, recording a playthrough blind, you know, not really knowing what to expect next. I think it was a lot of fun. Even though as many videos as we did get tiring after a while. But I do think I still will do this moving forward in the future. Whatever remasters / remake and whatever new titles come out, I think we will continue to do it this way. So if you enjoyed it, if you watched all the way through, then I do appreciate that you hopefully enjoyed it. Okay, so let's just dive right in. My first few attempts at doing this review, I had like kind of stuff written down that I wanted to talk about. I'm not doing that this time. I'm just gonna talk about whatever comes to mind when it comes to the game. So let's first talk about the gameplay. Let's talk about the new, you know, I say new battle system, but it's kind of more just an advanced version of what Berseria did, with some more polish up to it. I think overall, this is a mixed bag for me. I liked the gameplay. I want to say that. I liked how our arts were set up. I liked how we moved around the map. I think it was a lot of fun, you know, to try out the different styles. I think Rinwell, even though I really mainly used Alphen for most of my playthrough, you know, I did, you know, try out other characters both on screen and off screen. I think Rinwell was a very unique take at the mage, because I really like the whole fact of, you know, you could store the art and kind of like move around a bit and then activate it when you were ready. You know, if you're waiting for like a perfect time. So I think that was kind of cool. I like that all the characters had their own kind of unique parts. You know, Alphen had his blazing sword. Law had his ability where, you know, the longer it takes before you get hit, the more damage he's going to do. You know, his fist would start glowing and stuff like that. Like, all the characters had their own unique parts. I definitely did appreciate that. It made it more fun to play as a specific different character instead of it just being, oh, this guy's a sword wielder, this guy's a brawler, this girl is a mage, you know, all that type of stuff. What I didn't like about the gameplay, the enemy, there are two major things I can think of off the top of my head I didn't like. The lack of enemy variety. You know, pretty much every new area you were going to, you were fighting the same 6 enemies, they were just a different color palette. I do miss, you know, I know they said they wanted to go with a more serious tone for like the monsters as opposed to previous Tales games, you know, which means no pole wiggles, no you know, tall lanky monster things. You know, so they did do away with a lot of stuff like that, which, you know, if that was the reason, then I would have been okay with it, but I still would have wanted as much variety of different enemies. You know, when I go to the snow region, I want to fight enemies that, maybe like monstrous looking snowmen, stuff like that. When we get to the ocean, have the floating sharks or whatever, which they kind of had. But it just overall, I feel like there was a lack of enemy variety. Pretty much the wolves were in every area. It was the same wolf design. They were just different colors in each area. So I wasn't really happy about that. Second thing with the gameplay. There wasn't really... Now, obviously, I don't play the game for a challenge. I don't play it on the hardest difficulty. None of that stuff. But the enemies, even like the non-boss enemies, just felt super over-tanky. For players who... want to grind out materials and stuff like that, fight a bunch of monsters. In old Tales games, you go to the location, the materials are going to drop from, and, in like 20, 30 minutes, you kill, a bunch of mobs of enemies. In this game, each fight takes a lot longer. I would say in, like, Tales of Vesperia, for example, I would say a normal fight takes anywhere from, like, 20 seconds to a minute, depending on how, like, underleveled you are or whatever. In Arise... fights, even playing on like normal/easy, which I kept switching between, fights were on normal taking about a minute. That's a long time for a fight, especially if it's not a boss fight. So that was just my thing. I feel like the bosses were overly tanky. They really wanted to focus, and I get what they were going for. They really wanted to focus on kind of like, oh, you have to find the enemy's weak point and stuff like that. But after a while, you don't want to do that with random mobs, especially if you're just grinding stuff. You kind of just want to get in there, you want to kill the stuff, and then you want to move on. So I do think, like, I'd be fine if there were, like, specific, like, harder enemies in the field that are like, okay, these are the challenging ones, they're going to be a lot more tanky. But I feel like the general mob enemy should not take as long to kill. Another thing that I wasn't really a fan... This isn't really gameplay, but it kind of is. The level system... There are two things about the level system I wasn't a fan of. I don't like that they reduced the max level. This is, like, obviously it doesn't matter because there was no reason to go past level 100 in this game. But, for the last, as long as I can remember, the max level for Tales games has been 200. For a very long time it has been. There might be some games I haven't played yet that are different, but, at least all the way back to, some of the earlier games, it was 200, so I was kind of, like, thrown off. It was like, oh, okay, I beat the game, I'm already pretty close to the max level, and then when I beat all the cameo stuff, I was literally pretty much max level. I think once I beat the cameo stuff, I was like level 89 or 90, and then it took a couple more side quests, and then I was at 100. I think I had to farm Kronos. By the way, spoilers. I mean, this is... I'm sure most people know at this point. I had to farm Kronos a few times to kind of have that done. And then the other thing, I'm not a fan of... And, Pokemon started doing this recently, too. Well, not recently. It's been a few games. I don't like that you start getting less XP the more over-leveled you are, because eventually there's going to be enemies that you can't... There's going to be no enemies for you to get XP from, and that was kind of the issue when you got to, level 89 or 90. You pretty much just had to farm Kronos because he's the highest enemy in the game. You just had to farm him over and over to get to the max level. I don't know, it felt more like a job than it felt like a leveling experience, so I just wasn't a huge fan of that. Let's talk about the story. Story, the world, all that good stuff. I think the story was good. I'm not going to say it was great. I'm not going to say it was amazing. I think it was good. I think there are a lot of Tales games, I would say, that have a better story. I think it falls into the same issue that Vesperia had. So, Vesperia has a very solid first and second arc. I feel like the second arc of Vesperia is definitely the strongest point. But the third arc, it just feels, it's super short, it feels super rushed. And that's how I kind of felt with Arise. I feel like everything is great until you get to Volron in, his actual land. I think when you fight Volron, and the second opening plays, from when the second opening plays to the end of the game, it feels like a rushed mess. There's a lot of exposition drops without a lot of substance to it. most of the lore that you have to learn about, you know, the stuff that happens in the second act, you read on the computers. Those computers, when you go to Lenegus, there's like a whole bunch of lore they could have integrated into the game, but they just put it in the computers, and you have to read it. It just feels like a huge... I feel like the second act should have been at least as long as the first act, which it was not. I think the first act took me about 40 hours, and then it was like 15 to 20 hours for Act 2. So I think the second act definitely needed a lot more time to it. But I will say the first act is very solid. I like going from realm to realm. You know, it's very linear. You do the same stuff pretty much every time you go to a new realm, with like some changes. You know, because obviously when you go to the third realm, you don't fight the Lord immediately. You know, you do some side stuff to try and figure out where she is and all that good stuff. But overall, I think the story was fine. I think it's okay. I don't think it's great. I think there are a lot of Tales games that are definitely better structured, but I think the focus for this game was on the new graphics and the gameplay, so I do understand why the story isn't, like, the most perfect thing there. The other thing, this isn't praise or a complaint, but I did very well notice, and this is obviously something very different for Tales, that they put a lot of focus on relationships in this. Now, it's kind of weird when I say it, because I feel like every Tales game is focused on not relationships in the romantic sense. Like, you always have kind of like a family vibe by the end of a Tales game when it comes to like the main group. But in this game, it was literally about relationships. Like, there were 6 characters, and there were 3 pairs that were very much focused on in terms of like their feelings for each other. It was obviously Alphen and Xion, Law and Rinwell, and then Kisara and Dohalim. Like, with all the skits and stuff and side stuff you get, like, it's impossible to say that it wasn't the focus there. So that was just something interesting, you know, and obviously we did get our first Tales on-screen kiss at the end of the game, so that was, you know, obviously something new, and I was not expecting that at all. So it is, at least they did something new, so I will, you know, appreciate that. The world itself, like I mentioned before, the game is very linear. But I like the look of the world and everything. I do wish that there was more kind of ways to explore. Because like I said, you're pretty much going from point A to point B. There are some off the beaten path areas in some of the areas, but for the most part, they're forcing you to go to those places anyway, and like side quests and stuff later. There's not really a lot of like, I don't know if this is really like a complaint or not, but you know, in a lot of Tales games, sometimes there'll be areas that you're never forced to go. Like, there's no quests or anything that take you to these places. It's just kind of places you would have to find on your own. But I did appreciate that there was a lot of like stuff to find out in the open world. You know, like treasure chests, you know, that were just kind of in the middle of nowhere. I did find it interesting, though, in the demo, they let you find weapons in treasure chests, like the 6 weapons that were in the demo. But then there's not a single weapon treasure chest in the entire actual game. It's all accessories and armor. So I did find that interesting as well. The characters themselves, I think they are all very likable characters. I think specifically, the first 4 are done very well. I think Alpha and Xion are great, I think, with their character arcs. I think Law and Rinwell are great with their character arcs. But I have to be honest, and this is just my personal opinion, if you disagree, that's fine. I feel like Kisara and Dohalim kind of fall short. And I'll explain why. I feel like once you deal with Kisara's arc, when you first meet her, like when she first becomes a party member, like by the time you're done with, I think it's Elda Manancia, she doesn't really... I want to be careful because I don't want to make people mad, but she doesn't really do much. She's really like the parent of the group for the rest of the game. You know, when a character's upset or dealing with something, she talks to them, which is totally fine. You know, there's nothing wrong with that, but she didn't really have much of an impact on me. Now, if you disagree, you know, I'd love to hear what other people think, but just for me, specifically her, she didn't really do much for me. You know, once we were done with Elda Manancia, she was just kind of like in the party. And then the issue with Dohalim is you get nothing about him really until you get to Lenegus. And by then, the game is pretty much almost over. They do give you, you know, when you first meet him, you get, like, the hints of the flashback that, like, there's obviously something. But then, you know, it takes 30 hours later before, and then you're like, oh yeah, you know, this was a story thing that they started with him. So I do feel like it's kind of the same issue with Presea and Regal. I feel like Presea and Regal come into the game in Symphonia so late that you don't get as much build-up time to kind of do stuff with them. So I think it's a similar issue. I still like the characters. It's just, you know, they aren't as impactful as the rest of the party. What else to kind of talk about here? I honestly... I know probably a lot of people probably enjoyed it, but I did fishing like maybe 3 times, and then I just never touched it, because there never really seemed to be a reason to touch it, besides like some side stuff. Because it's not like you really use the fishing for a heck of a ton. You know, obviously there's some cooking recipes that you definitely could have used, you know, some of those materials for. But for the most part, I pretty much had everything I needed. Although I was told, you know, as I was getting close to the end of the game, you know, you could just sell the fish to have more money. And I didn't even think about that, you know, considering lack of money was definitely a thing. That's the other thing I want to talk about. That's more of a gameplay thing. It's not, well, it's kind of gameplay. It's more like just game design. The way we make money in this game, I don't like. You don't make money from winning fights. The only way you make money is by completing quests and selling things. I wish it just stayed how Tales always was, where you get a certain amount of money from each enemy, and then you can have extra stuff that you can sell. Plus, like, orange gels and pineapple gels were way too expensive, considering you have 1 gauge for all of your healing points, considering the cure points thing was a thing. I didn't inherently hate the cure points thing, but they definitely needed to make it to where we could get gels a lot more easily. So hopefully it's something they revise in future games. Skits. Let's talk about skits. I don't like them. They didn't do it for me. I've seen a lot of people say the same thing, and I agree. They just don't do it for me. I don't like the 3D skits. I want to go back to how it looks in Berseria, how it looks in Cristoria right now. Just show me the full body 2D images. I don't care if it doesn't look as, you know, fancy as moving character models, but even this wasn't moving character models. It was just their mouths moving, and their bodies were still, like, staying still. So I definitely say just go back to 2D skits. I feel like they have a lot more life to them, because you can't do a lot of the, and I mentioned this before the game came out, there's a lot you can't do with these 3D skits. You know, faces like some characters make, you know, like Magilu, for example, she makes a lot of ridiculous faces. You can't make those in 3D. So I really do hope, you know, if they're going to do 3D, they need to go all out with the 3D and then, you know, fix this. I don't have a problem with the comic book style. Like, if they're going to stick with this and, you know, improve on it. I mean, obviously I'd prefer 2D skits, but if they're going to improve on it, they need to make it more structured, because just the random panels coming from random places was just too hard to follow, especially if you're, and this might just be a me issue because I'm playing in Japanese and having to read the subtitles, but reading the subtitles and having to figure out where a character is going to fly in from, and, you know, they just kind of cover each other up. I just really wasn't a fan of it. I'd rather just have all the characters in their 2D images on the screen, you know, talking together. And then you can make animation. You can even, you know, if you want to do that, just evolve the 2D skit formula. Like, if you want to have movement, just have the 2D skits actually, you know, have some kind of movement. But yeah, so that's how I feel about the skits. Not really a huge fan overall. I will say that, interestingly enough, you know, they said this game has the most 2D skits. You know, like the UFO table, or not skits, like animations. So like the 2D cutscenes. But realistically, you get a few in the beginning of the game. Like, you get them back to back to back. And then, like, it takes like 60% of the game before you get your next one. The next one you get is pretty much when you're in the second act. Like, I think the last one you get before towards the end of the first act is when Alphen breaks down the first wall in Calaglia. And then it's like, you don't get any 2D skits. Oh no, I remember when the next one is. It's when you get that 2D skit in the plaza, I believe, where the Third Lord. With Third Lord? 1, 2... Yeah, I believe it's the third. Yeah, where the Third Lord, the lady, I don't remember her name. She wasn't. Sadly, she wasn't memorable enough for me. Where she's in like the plaza and she melts all the people into the goo. I think that's when the next actual skit happens. So it's a long time before you get your next one. But other than that, I think those are kind of like the main points. I mostly played as Alpha. I mostly play as the main character / a sword fighter. I think the big change in a Tales game is like Legendy. I played as Chloe more than I played as Senel, just because she was like the usual, you know, one-handed sword user. And I'm really not good with Senel's grab stuff, so I didn't really play as him too much. And then eventually when I did, I just didn't use his grabs. But I feel like all the characters had fun and unique playstyles. You know, even just using, like right now, Alphen and Shion are currently in Tales of the Rays. I'm having fun using them there as well. And it'll be interesting to see how everyone else goes there. But I think that's pretty much it. Those are pretty much my main thoughts. I thought the cameo stuff was well done. I liked seeing Edna, Aizen, and Kronos. I liked seeing the areas for the cameo stuff. But other than that, I think that's pretty much all I really want to say about Tales of Arise. So this is good. Unless, like I said, unless they come out with more DLC like the SAO stuff, this will probably be my last video on actual Tales of Arise. And then, you know, we'll get talking whenever they announce the, you know, a port of something or a remaster or whatever the, you know, the next main title I would guess wouldn't be till like 2025. Maybe 2024, depending on how started they already are on the next Tales game, considering they already have their new, like, engine set up for Tales on, you know, kind of like modern consoles. So we'll just have to see how it goes. But let me know what you guys thought about Tales of Arise. Overall, if I were to rate it, like, from 1 to 10, the overall experience, I would still say I'd give it, like, an 8 because I did really enjoy the game. But yeah, hopefully a lot of people did too. It definitely is doing well. It sold over 1.5 million copies so far. So I definitely think this is a good thing for the future of the Tales series. So that'll be it. So thank you for watching. Hope you all enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe for more if you're new to the channel. I'll see you next time. Have a wonderful day, everyone.